So today's content's gonna be a little bit different. I'm kind of dipping my toe into what I want to do for content. And, a video discussion sounded like a lot of fun to do, especially with Master Duel and a whole bunch of talk with OCG going around. I figured this would be the best time to talk about this. So I hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you guys at the end of the video. In my Master Duel review video, I talked about how I believe that TCG could learn a thing or two from OCG in terms of how we construct our ban lists in our format. I say this because the balance of OCG is a lot better than it is in TCG. What do I mean by this? Well, the decks themselves and the format themselves are a lot better balanced in OCG, specifically so that we have a lot more variety in the format, but we also don't straight up murder decks inside of a format, so that those decks can see play over time. Now, how does OCG do this? Well, they don't murder cards and decks. What they'll actually do is they will slowly hit a deck enough so that power creep will eventually overpower them, let them phase them out, essentially letting them phase out of the format. Now we see this specifically with, for example, Thunder Dragons, where instead of banning Colossus and leaving all the other cards alone, we saw them limit Colossus and also hit other cards. So we see Hawk at 1 and we see Roar at 2. Now, Thunder is still a playable deck in OCG as of the time of saying this, because Colossus is a great card. If it sticks and your opponent doesn't have an out to it, they literally cannot search. But because power creep has kicked in a little bit over the 2 years since this card is, or this deck has been hit, the format has balanced itself out to where it either doesn't have to worry about not being able to search, or when they do resolve their search cards, they basically have full combo anyway. Or things like impermanence, droplets, or chalices come back into the format, which can just easily turn off these kind of decks. Now, TCG, on the other hand, likes to murder their decks. We saw Colossus get banned, and then the deck has not seen any play outside of one accidental YCS top in almost 2 years. There has been no regional tops, even at the LDS level for remote duels. There has been no YCS tops. There's been, I bet you there's not even a locals top with this deck, just because of how slow and inconsistent the deck is without Colossus. It has no staying power. The deck has no resiliency. It hard loses to Nibiru and the likes. Same thing goes for Striker. In OCG, Striker is still a fairly good deck because engages is at 2, but we also see things like Widow Anchor go to 2. We also see Kagari go to 1. So that way the deck doesn't have infinite consistency. We even have 3, the multi-roll in OCG. And the deck still only manages to squeak out 1 or 2 tops per event, because the deck is just not what it used to be. Now, of course, if we had all these cards back, the deck would be a lot better and probably would be topping more. But topple the fact that we have a lot of cards on the limited list and the really high skill ceiling for Striker is preventing this deck from just fully enveloping what it was, which is a good thing, because not only is this deck playable, but it's good at the locals level and encourages higher level players to play the deck. Same thing goes for Salad. We have Gazelle at 1 over here, and I believe they also have, do they have Mirage banned? I don't believe they do, given this list is a bit outdated at this point, because yeah, Mirage is not banned. In fact, is Mirage at 3? No, Mirage is just straight up not here. It's at 3, and Salad is still a good deck, but it's not toppling the format. Again, Orchist. We have Galatea and Gearsu at 1, but we also have Harporer at 1, making the deck way more playable, because this is super searchable, this is super searchable, and this is super recurable with Gearsu and Symbol Skeleton. So the deck is still playable, but the deck is not murdered, or the deck is not taking over the format like it did back in 2020, or excuse me, in 2019. We even see them properly use the semi-limited list. This is something, again, I wish TCG would do, where instead of, in TCG we have this saying where, like, the semi-limited list is useless because if it can be semi-limited, it can either go to 1, banned, or it can go to 3. In OCG, that's not quite true. They actually use it to not only put cards, or touch cards in a way so that they're not always openable, but they use it with combinations of cards on the limit list, so that way you don't always see this a lot. So like Engage over here at 1 in TCG is a lot better because we have 3 Kagari. You could argue Engage could go to 2 over here, but they have to hit Kagari. they actually combo these different hits on the ban list so that way they can let these decks live a little bit longer. Given their ban lists are bigger, but since when is a small ban list a good thing? We don't really want to have a ton of cards banned, but we also don't want to have problem cards in the format. You see what I mean? We would rather see decks, or personally, I would rather see decks be playable, but still not topping every event. Also, they use it to hit generic cards that could be a little bit too splashable if we were to let them roam 3. For example, Call by the Grave is at 2 in OCG, Wall Crossout being at 3. So essentially, we only have 5 copies of Call by the Grave, which makes it more balanced in a sense. They also have hit hand traps in the past. I believe they've hit Ash Blossom. Gamma is actually at 1 now in OCG because this card is really good with at not only stopping Max C, but it does put a body or 2 bodies on the field you can do anything with. They also use it to peel off other cards. Like I believe Scapegoat has recently been put back to 2, and it actually might be back at 3. Because again, Master Duel's ban list is a little bit out of date. Uh, and again, with Thunder Dragons, we see Roar go to 2, while Hawk and Colossus are both at 1, making the deck still super playable. But you have to have a higher skill ceiling to use these cards effectively. We see generic, like again, generic or not generic searchers, but in archetype searchers like Oviraptor, Engage, Cursed Land, Meltdown. These cards in multiples are really, really good, but the fact that they're at 1 or at 2 makes them slightly less consistent and will increase the skill ceiling because you have to know when to use these cards effectively. Now, we've discussed why OCG does what they do and how they do it. Now, what does TCG do? Well, switching over to the TCG ban list here, we like to just straight up murder stuff. If we don't like it, we want it gone, and we want it gone for a long time, making the people that play those decks disincentivized from playing them, which means you have to straight up buy the new decks if you want to play competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, maybe that's a business decision, and I couldn't speak for that on my own because, of course, I don't work for Konami. But if we're looking at this from a pure balance standpoint, it's bad for the game because not only do people have to completely get new cards if they want to play, uh, which in OCG is a non-issue because most of the cards are really, really small, or not, excuse me, not small, but really low rarity. But it disincentivizes players from buying new cards because they don't want to pick up a deck if in 6 to 8 months it's going to get banned and then just become completely unplayable. Now, what have we done? What have we seen this done with? We've seen it done with Draco, which used to be a really good budget option if you just wanted a deck that was consistently good for a long time, while never the best deck. We saw it with, of course, the 2019 Eternal format. Colossus, Engage, Mirage, and Harp Horror all got banned and became completely unplayable until some of their cards came off the list. We've even seen it with individual cards. Jet Synchron being banned specifically so we don't have to hit Halka Fibrax is extremely unhealthy. If Halka Fibrax is a problem, and decks that run Halka Fibrax is a problem, we should hit Halka Fibrax. We should not be jumping around the issue just because we don't want to hit a new card. And even at this point, Halka Fibrax has been in the game for at least a year now. So it's not like they're still selling Halka Fibrax. So why don't we hit Halka Fibrax if it's actually a problem? Also, something else OCG has done is that they have completely dealt with burn decks, or specifically FTK style burn. So like we see Amazon's Archer here, Toon Cannon Soldier Mark II, the other Cannon Soldiers here. They're really, really good at dealing with FTKs before they're a problem. Amaryllis is hit, Tyrant Neptune was hit famously before the Laryless Fusion monster came out. Starving Venom, of all fucking things, is still at 3 for some reason. They also are more likely to hit problem cards. For example, Mystic Mine in TCG, people have been begging for this card to get banned for years, basically since its release, because nobody likes going up against a mine player that just sits on mine, stops you from playing the game entirely. Same thing with Dragoon. Given Dragoon was not nearly as big of a problem in TCG as it was in OCG, because this on its own plays through Max C and under Nibiru, so you don't have to worry about it. Plus, there's they have singles, so they don't have access to like Dark Ruler in the side, or they have to main deck droplets to out this. Now, that's an entirely different discussion on its own, whether singles for TCG would be good or not. But in the context of playing best of threes, these kind of cards do not need to exist, especially with enabling or FTK enabling. Again, with Gandora here and all the other tribute to burn cards. Again, you could argue that, and again, Wind Up Hunter. They banned this card and let the carrier come back because the Wind-Up Hunter was the problem. We're not jumping around the issue by hitting the carrier instead of this. They're also, again, here's another one, Tempest Magician. They straight up banned it, and we had to sit through like 2 formats with it. Magical Explosion and Life Equalizer, both banned immediately or as soon as FTK was found with it. And then the rest of these cards have been banned forever because they've done it for a long time. Cannon Soldier, one of the most famous ones with Firewall FTK, it's been banned for like 2 years at this point. And this is another thing that we could do in the TCG, but we just straight up don't for some reason. Now, we know that TCG and OCG is different, but what does their competitive scene look like? So for OCG, we see Branded, Despia, and Eldritch. We see a lot of different decks for the format. Branded Despia appears to be the best one because they have to do Branded Fusion, but they also have Brave Tenyi, which is a good deck over there because they have the Brave engine, which basically gives out free tokens. And to be clear, in terms of card pool, TCG to OCG is not all that different. OCG does of course have sets before we do because I don't know why. I don't know why they think it's a good idea to release these cards at different times, but whatever. Maybe it's just a monetary issue. Who knows? But the only thing they have above us is the Brave engine and the Branded engine. I believe as of recording, they've gotten the new core set, but there's not much in that new core set other than the Striker stuff that I can think would be really, really good. Now, look at how many different decks they have. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in the top 75%. 11 decks. That's crazy for us. We don't really see that very often. Over here, we see 3 or 4 decks taking up roughly the top 60%. Then we see a few rogue decks that get top cut every now and then. Of course, we see a ton of others as well. But here's the thing with OCG. This is not others is a lot of different decks. There could be a ton of stuff here. These are just people that have gotten top cut more than once. So let's take a look at what we have in TCG. Boink, go over here, and then switch up to this. Shout out to MCO40 for picking up the Remote Duel YCS top cut breakdown. Again, in TCG, usually the first 60-ish%, we see 3 or 4 decks. We see Sword Soul, Bird Up, Striker, again, getting played, but I'll get to this, why this is a good deck in TCG, and Invoke Dogmatica Pile. Again, 4 decks in the entirety of essentially what would be the entire percentage of OCG if we were looking at them other than other. The rest of these decks are decks that are good in OCG. For example, Eldritch is a good deck, but because the format over here is a lot more combo heavy, Eldritch can't really keep up without some sort of supplementary engine like Dogmatica for making Winda. And then Pure Tri Brigade, of course, is a thing because DPE exists. And we have Fusion Destiny still at 3 over here. Drytron has basically fallen out because people don't really respect, or like Bird Up just deals with it entirely. It also has a really bad Sword Soul matchup because Protoss and Chao Feng just exist. But again, the primary thing we need to focus on here is these 4 decks. Again, if we were to look over at OCG, if we were to look at this percentage, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 7 decks here, just out of that much of a percentage. I think that's fantastic. I don't know why in TCG we're okay with this, because I guess people like picking up one deck and then being able to top with it. Fair enough. I do that too. But if we're talking about the health of a game, we should talk more about how diverse we can get the format. Now, again, Striker is a good deck. Now, why is Striker a good deck? The reason Striker, despite its many, many, many hits on the ban list for TCG, and Engage coming back to 1, of course, does make this deck good, but the reason it's good is because the players who play it are exceptionally good. The skill ceiling and skill floor for Striker is really, really high. You have to be really good to be able to play Striker effectively, and you almost have to have been playing it since release, because the amount of people that actually play Striker is really small, but almost all of them have played this deck a long time and are really, really good at it. Now, another reason this deck is really good is because it's really good against all these other decks, and because people have been playing it a long time, it has a lot of potential in going into this format. Plus, people love this deck. It's a fan favorite deck. With Engage coming back to 1, a lot of people are going to play it. Plus, with Pasadena being canceled, which is essentially what this was supposed to, Remote Duel YCS was supposed to be Pasadena, the ability for people that were not going to Pasadena to come to this format also gave this deck a better shot at topping, because a lot of people play it. I'm sure if we saw like how many people were in the entirety of the event, we would see this deck be probably one of the top 4 best decks, specifically because the amount of not it wouldn't necessarily turn into the best deck in terms of overall making top cut, but it would be one of the best decks in terms of how played it is because a lot of people love this deck. So, what do I propose be the optimal way to solve this issue? Well, in my opinion, we should solve this issue in one of 2 ways. We should either promote TCG ban list making folks to learn from OCG, whether it be just speaking out, saying, hey, we don't want to see our decks murdered every time a new ban list comes around. We want to see them naturally get played out because of power creep. And this is good for the game because it means that the people who are making cards can make new cards that turn or purposely make it so that people don't want to play their old decks and want to buy the new stuff. Now, if we were to there's the second way we could do this, which is straight up make TCG and OCG the same thing. Now, I have a theory about how they would do this. And I think this is the most unlikely way they would fix this problem because it would be a massive undertaking in terms of like just the sheer logistics of it. But what we would have to do is over time we would have to get it so that the OCG is no longer ahead of us in terms of card pool because that is one of the biggest differences here. They would have to decrease the rate of which OCG products gets released, and they increase the rate of which TCG products get released, so that in a way, or that over time, they will be eventually become the exact same. And then at that point, they would release a new master rule, or they would make just some sort of general announcement saying, hey, we're not doing OCG TCG anymore. We're going to start making the ban list the same. Now, another thing people tell me all the time is, well, another big other than Max C, another reason why TCG and OCG is so different is because we think differently. And that's true to a sense. But because of the split, we have started to think differently. If we were to become one general player base again, we would eventually see people thinking the same way. Either it's just the way people are. If you get a bunch of people together that have one same common goal, eventually they're going to mediate toward a norm. TCG players would eventually become more like OCG players, and OCG players become more like TCG players. We would play more. TCG players would start to learn to play more conservatively, and things like Maxi would allow us to play slower decks, so that way so that these big combo decks don't come around and hurt us. And OCG would learn to start playing combo decks because of how popular they are, how numerous they are, and because if we decide to start taking more pointers from OCG, the decks would start to become the same power level, and the card pool would eventually make it viable, so that way we could do this. Now, I personally think the first option is better for us. We should just start having our ban list should just be different or just be made different. And I wish that the Yu-Gi-Oh community as a whole would start to endorse this because it genuinely makes the game more fun to play when there's more decks in the format. Now you can talk about how side decking patterns become weird because you have to side for a whole bunch of different decks. You can't side for 3 or 4 decks or just you have to find specific cards that are only good against all wide range of matchups, and they'll make those cards expensive and all that. But besides that, having a bunch of different decks in the format is inherently more balanced because not only are you going to see more stuff, but you won't be playing against the same eternal decks every single weekend. And that's why I think we should have a upgrade, or we should change the way the TCG ban list is made. Alright, so that was the video. Yeah, like I said, this is brand new content for me. I'm kind of just dipping my toe here. I want to see what you guys think. So I'll be down in the comments, just discussing stuff. If you'd like to discuss today's topic, I'll be down there too. Like I said, I'm gonna be down in the comments for a long time. I'm there. I still talk about some videos that have been out for almost a year now, given that was like 3 videos ago. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one.